For centuries, humanity believed it understood the natural world well enough to tame it, name it, classify it, and bend it to survival. We assumed that plants which fed us were allies, and those that choked our fields were enemies. But buried beneath layers of soil, forgotten tools, and broken civilizations lies a quieter, more unsettling truth. Some of the most destructive weeds in human history were not invaders at all, but companions, plants that evolved beside us, learned our habits, mimicked our crops, and quietly rewrote the story of agriculture while we weren't looking. What we once dismissed as mindless nuisances were, in reality, ancient strategists that learned how humans think, farm, and survive, and then used that knowledge against us. The first farmers of the Fertile Crescent believed they were inventing something entirely new when they planted wheat and barley in neat rows. Archaeological evidence shows early agriculture was messy, experimental, and deeply vulnerable. Fields were not sterile environments but chaotic ecosystems where wild grasses grew alongside domesticated crops. Over generations, humans unknowingly selected plants that were easier to harvest, grains that held onto their seeds, stalks that stood upright, plants that matured at the same time. But while humans were selecting crops, certain wild plants were also selecting humans. These weeds adapted to disturbed soil, learned to germinate when fields were plowed, and evolved seeds that looked almost identical to the grains humans wanted to keep. Farmers thought they were improving agriculture, but in reality, they were training weeds to survive. One of the most astonishing discoveries came from ancient seed caches found in Neolithic settlements. Mixed among wheat kernels were seeds nearly indistinguishable in size, shape, and weight, belonging to plants we now label as weeds. At the time, farmers had no way of separating them. Every harvest, every replanting, helped these plants spread further. Over centuries, these weeds became so intertwined with agriculture that they reshaped entire farming systems. Crop failures blamed on drought or divine punishment may, in many cases, have been slow biological sabotage. Fields overwhelmed not by foreign invaders, but by plants that had evolved specifically to live off human labor. The deception went deeper. Some weeds developed growth cycles that perfectly mirrored crops, making them invisible until it was too late. Others evolved brittle stems that broke during harvest, scattering seeds back into the soil for the next season. Humans believed these traits were accidents of nature, but modern evolutionary biology suggests something more unsettling. These plants were adapting to human behavior itself. Agriculture was not just changing plants, it was creating a new evolutionary battlefield where intelligence didn't require a brain, only time. Ancient texts hint at this struggle. Sumerian tablets complain of false grain, ruining harvests. Roman agricultural manuals describe plants that pretend to be wheat until the sickle comes. Medieval farmers developed rituals, superstitions, and prayers to ward off bad harvests, never realizing the enemy wasn't supernatural, it was botanical. These weeds were so effective that entire regions altered crop choices, field designs, and planting seasons to escape them. In some cases, humans abandoned fertile land altogether, not because the soil failed, but because weeds had mastered it. What makes this story even more disturbing is that many of these ancient weeds still exist today. They are embedded in modern agriculture, resistant to herbicides, adaptable to climate shifts, and remarkably skilled at exploiting human shortcuts. Genetic studies reveal that some weeds possess greater genetic diversity than the crops they infest, allowing them to evolve faster, respond quicker, and survive harsher conditions. They are living fossils of an ancient arms race that never ended. The illusion of control is perhaps the greatest trick these plants ever played on us. We believed progress meant dominance, that technology would eventually erase the problem. But each new farming method created new opportunities for deception. Mechanized harvesting favored weeds that grew at the same height as crops. Chemical herbicides selected for plants that could detoxify poisons. Monoculture farming handed weeds a predictable enemy, and predictability is an evolutionary gift. Again and again, humans thought they had won, only to discover the weeds had simply changed strategy. Looking back, it becomes clear that ancient weeds didn't just fool us once. They fooled us continuously, across civilizations, continents, and centuries. They shaped diets, influenced migrations, and quietly altered the course of human history. The fields that fed empires were also laboratories of deception, where plants learned to exploit the most powerful species on Earth. And the most uncomfortable realization of all is this: if these weeds outsmarted us for thousands of years without us noticing, how many other silent strategies are still unfolding beneath our feet? As modern science peeled back the layers of ancient soil, the comforting narrative that humans were always the masters of agriculture began to crack. Archaeobotanists examining charred seeds from Bronze Age settlements noticed something unsettling. The proportion of weed seeds increased precisely during periods when farming techniques became more advanced. This was not coincidence. When humans improved plowing, irrigation, and crop selection, weeds did not disappear. They flourished. The very innovations meant to secure food instead created ideal conditions for botanical deception. Disturbed soil, predictable planting schedules, and nutrient-rich fields were evolutionary invitations, and certain plants accepted them with terrifying efficiency. Genetic analysis of ancient weed species revealed patterns that challenged long-held assumptions. Some weeds showed signs of rapid adaptation within just a few human generations. Their seeds became harder to distinguish from crops, their germination synchronized with planting seasons, and their root systems adapted to exploit fertilizers before crops could fully establish. These plants were not merely surviving human agriculture, they were optimizing for it. In evolutionary terms, humans had become a resource, and weeds had learned how to harvest us. The story grows darker when researchers examined ancient famines. Traditionally attributed to climate shifts, floods, or warfare, many famine layers contained overwhelming quantities of weed pollen and seeds. Fields had not gone barren, they had been overtaken. Crops were present but suffocated, starved of sunlight and nutrients by plants that looked harmless until maturity. To farmers without microscopes or genetic tools, these failures appeared mysterious and sudden. But the reality was slower, quieter, and more humiliating. Humans had been feeding their own competitors year after year. One of the most striking examples comes from ancient rye-like weeds that infiltrated early wheat fields in Europe. These plants mimicked wheat so effectively that they passed through every stage of selection. Harvested, stored, replanted, again and again. Over time, they became toxic. Bread baked from contaminated grain caused hallucinations, convulsions, and death, giving rise to myths of curses, demonic possession, and divine punishment. Entire communities blamed gods, witches, or moral decay, never suspecting that a plant they had nurtured was poisoning them. This was not just agricultural deception, it was psychological warfare carried out by nature itself. In Asia, rice agriculture faced similar betrayals. Weeds evolved seeds that sank at the same depth as rice, sprouted at the same time, and bent their stems to mimic crop posture. Farmers developed backbreaking hand-weeding techniques, spending countless hours bent over flooded fields, not realizing that their labor itself was selecting for weeds that required even more effort to remove. Each generation of weeds became better disguised, better timed, better suited to human exhaustion. What shocked scientists most was how weeds responded to human attempts at control. Ancient crop rotation, thought to confuse pests, sometimes strengthened weeds with flexible life cycles. Selective harvesting encouraged weeds that dropped seeds earlier. Even fire, used to clear fields, favored plants with heat-resistant seeds. Again and again, the pattern repeated. Humans acted, weeds adapted. There was no final victory, only escalation. By the time writing emerged, humanity had already been locked in this silent war for thousands of years. Yet our records rarely acknowledge it directly. Instead, they speak of bad years, cursed land, angry gods. The true enemy remained unnamed because it was invisible, woven into the fabric of daily life. Weeds were not outsiders, they were familiar, ordinary, everywhere. That familiarity made them dangerous. You don't fear what you believe you understand. The industrial age did not end this deception, it amplified it. As agriculture scaled up, weeds scaled faster. Machinery rewarded uniform growth, chemicals selected for resistance, global trade spread ancient weeds to new continents where they encountered naive ecosystems and exploded uncontrollably. Plants that once haunted small Neolithic fields now strangled millions of hectares. What we called modern problems were ancient strategies finally given global reach. The most uncomfortable realization emerging from all this research is not that weeds are clever, but that intelligence itself may be the wrong word. These plants didn't plan, scheme, or think. They simply responded, relentlessly, efficiently, without ego. While humans argued, worshipped, blamed, and rationalized, weeds adapted. They did not need awareness to outmaneuver us. Evolution did the thinking for them. By the late 20th century, scientists finally acknowledged what ancient farmers never could. Agriculture was never a one-sided invention. It was a co-evolutionary trap. Humans created fields, and fields created weeds that specialized in exploiting humans. The illusion of dominance collapsed under genetic data, fossil pollen, and historical yield records. We were not the sole architects of farming history. We were participants in a system that quietly shaped us back. And this realization leads to a more disturbing question, one that refuses to stay buried in the past. If ancient weeds could manipulate human behavior, belief systems, and survival for thousands of years, what does that say about our current confidence? Are today's solutions truly solutions, or just the next phase of a much older deception still unfolding beneath our crops, our cities, and our certainty? The moment modern science finally understood what ancient farmers never could was not a moment of triumph, but of unease. Genetic sequencing exposed a truth that felt almost insulting in its simplicity. Many weeds were not random pests but evolutionary mirrors of our crops, shaped directly by human decision-making over thousands of years. Their genomes carried signatures of adaptation that aligned perfectly with agricultural milestones: plowing, irrigation, selective breeding, chemical control. Every major human advance left a fingerprint inside the DNA of plants we had dismissed as inferior. The realization was unavoidable. We were not solving a problem. We were participating in a feedback loop that rewarded deception. As researchers reconstructed the evolutionary timelines of these weeds, an unsettling pattern emerged. The most successful species were not the most aggressive or the fastest growing, but the most subtle. They blended in. They waited. They exploited assumptions. Some evolved to resemble crops at early stages, only revealing their true nature once competition was already lost. Others developed seed dormancy, lying silent in the soil for years, waiting for a familiar disturbance pattern, a plow, a harvest, a chemical spray, to signal that humans had returned. These plants were not reacting to nature. They were reacting to us. The concept of superweeds shocked the public, but to evolutionary biologists, it was simply the next chapter of an ancient story. Resistance to herbicides was not a sudden mutation but the amplification of traits that had always existed. Ancient weeds that survived fire, drought, and hand-pulling were pre-adapted to survive chemicals. Modern farming simply accelerated the process. In some regions, weeds now grow faster than crops, absorb nutrients more efficiently, and withstand conditions that kill everything else. The battlefield tilted again, not because humans failed to innovate, but because innovation itself became predictable. This predictability is the heart of the problem. Agriculture depends on repetition. Same fields, same seasons, same crops. Evolution thrives on repetition. Every time humans standardize food production, they create a clearer signal for weeds to exploit. Monocultures become open invitations. Control measures become filters that allow only the most deceptive plants to pass through. What remains is not chaos, but refinement. A quieter, more capable enemy shaped by our own insistence on order. The psychological impact of this realization is profound. For thousands of years, humans framed agriculture as proof of superiority over nature. We told ourselves the land was tamed, that wildness had been replaced by management. But the truth is far less comforting. Nature did not retreat, it adapted. Weeds are not evidence of failure but evidence of engagement. They are responses, not rebels. And in many ways, they reveal the limits of human dominance more honestly than any climate model or extinction statistic. Even now, beneath modern cities, ancient weed seeds remain viable, waiting. Construction sites, roadside cracks, abandoned lots, these are modern equivalents of ancient fields. Disturbed ground still speaks the same evolutionary language. And weeds still listen. The plants that once fooled early farmers now exploit global supply chains, climate instability, and human dependence on a narrow range of crops. The scale has changed. The strategy has not. Some scientists argue that the solution lies not in stronger control, but in humility. Diversified crops, ecological farming, and unpredictable systems may finally disrupt the patterns weeds have learned to exploit. But even these approaches acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. there is no final victory. There is only balance, adaptation, and ongoing negotiation with forces that do not care about human pride or narratives of progress. Looking back, ancient weeds did more than infiltrate fields. They shaped economies, influenced belief systems, and contributed to the rise and fall of civilizations. They poisoned bread, triggered famines, altered migration routes, and forced societies to innovate under pressure. And through it all, they remained unnamed villains, hiding in plain sight. The greatest deception was not their success, but our refusal to recognize it. The story of agriculture, often told as a tale of human genius, is equally a story of being outmaneuvered by organisms without minds, intentions, or malice. We were fooled not because weeds were smarter, but because evolution is relentless, and humans mistook control for understanding. The ancient fields still whisper this lesson, encoded in seeds, soil, and forgotten harvests. And perhaps the final irony is this: the plants we once tried to erase may be the most honest teachers we have. They remind us that survival is not about dominance, but responsiveness. Not about winning, but enduring. Ancient weeds fooled us because we believed the story was only about us. It never was.